Hi, I am Kevin Quigley, and welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. I picked up my first tarot deck in 1982 when I was 12 years old. I spent the summer giving readings to my friends and kind of freaking them out, and then I misplaced it. Maybe 15 years later, I picked up another tarot deck, and I've been reading professionally pretty much since then. Tarot reading for me is about building up a conversation. A conversation not just between myself and my client, but between our higher selves, so that we might bring down some information that might help make us a little bit more conscious and maybe even our lives a little bit better. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tarot Off the Cuff. I am Kevin Quigley. It just stopped raining, so I decided that meant, since the last time I used this deck, the last little video I recorded, it was raining. It started raining while I was doing it. I'm going to use the Hush Tarot. This is my newest deck. I have not read with it for a person at all. I've just sort of been kind of glancing through it, but even not that much because I'm a teacher. It's the beginning of school, end of August, and I have been doing so much class prep that I haven't had much time to get a tarot deck out for myself at all. So I've got a deck here. It's shuffled up pretty well. I'm going to grab the top card. It might take me a second to even look at the card to figure out what it is, because I know the way that this one is marked takes a second to notice. Okay, here we go. I've pulled. All right, so here, I'm just gonna do some guessing based on the images. Let's see what happens, because on my phone right now, that's what I can see it in. The little number down here is too small. It looks like a single digit, but I think there's Roman numerals there. And then up here is the suit. And I'm guessing that's either swords or wands. And if I look at it, I see these dandelions up there, which makes me feel like we're talking swords because the seeds sort of take flight and fly. But maybe not, we'll see. Those could be wands for the artist as well. And then we've got someone that's sort of curled up at the bottom, looks somebody with long hair. So could be male or female, I can't tell. And they're crunched down in a little ball. This could be the 8, it could be the 10. I'm thinking in swords terms right now. What else? Well, okay, now I'm just gonna look at it. Let's see. Okay, this is the 10 of Swords. So in this case, we've got somebody sort of curled up with their nose on their knees. They're looking down at their knees. Their forehead is resting against their knees, and their maybe arms, are both behind their back. Hair is a little askew, and they're naked. They're completely naked. If it's to scale, there's some kind of a fairy or something, or forest spirit, because these dandelions would be enormous around them, if that's the case. I'm going to set it down on the table where I can glance at it because it's such a new image to me. Yes, these are dandelions. I can tell just by looking at that image. And I can't tell if that's a pointy ear or if that's a bit of hair. I think it's a bit of hair. Okay, so 10 of Swords. What do we know about the 10 of Swords? So in terms of topic, okay, so topics for me are endings. And in fact, I was just having a conversation with a friend about drawing boundaries, the need to draw very clear boundaries, and how hard that can be sometimes, especially in a family system that's very used to to crossing. They've got very fuzzy boundaries. People can criticize anyone at any given moment, or there are some things that you're able to say directly to people, and then other things that you couldn't ever possibly say, right? So lots of, strange boundary issues with family systems in particular, oftentimes. So the 10 of Swords for me is about this major final cutting, so it can have to do with that. It can also have to do with endings. So maybe I'll talk a little bit about boundary stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about how to end a reading. How about that? Like, that's an ending that really has to happen. I do know, I've had conversations and experiences with a number of tarot readers that actually find finalizing their reading is a difficult thing for them to do. They'll talk and talk and talk and go on. They scheduled 30 minutes or they scheduled 60 minutes, and it's now, oh my gosh, we've been talking for 2.5 hours, right? What do you do in that point? As I take a look at this image, it's a little softer than a lot of 10 of Swords. There's one I remember seeing. I was just about to buy the deck, and then I came across the 10 of Swords and decided that it wasn't going to work for me because I think it had elves or something in it, and there was somebody lying on the floor, stabbed with the 10 swords, and the blood was pooling out everywhere, and the dramatic angle that the artist took. It was an amazing piece of art. It really was. But all I could imagine was dropping that down onto the table with somebody that was experiencing some kind of trauma or was in some real pain, or maybe even pain over the death of somebody that they've recently lost. And oh my gosh, what would that would stop a reading. It was just way too intense a card. And then this one with the I'm going to decide it's female, and I'm only deciding based on the length of hair, and I'm somebody that has long hair, so I'm trying not to be sexist that way, but that's the way it's striking me. So we've got a female that's sort of curled up, so the feminine side of ourself that's sort of curled up, but it's softer. As I look at this, one of the dandelions looks like it's growing through her. So maybe this is a corpse. This might be a fairy burial where the earth reclaims this body and things actually grow out of the ending. All right, so there we go. So I got 3 things to talk about. First, I'll talk about boundaries. Second, I'll talk about how to end a reading. And third is how to end that reading in order for it to become a growth mechanism. There we go. I see, looking at the clock, I'm at 5 minutes, so I'm going to go relatively quickly. Oftentimes, when people come in for a tarot reading, especially if the tarot reader is very kind and reads as trustworthy, they relax their own personal boundaries. It can be really helpful for many in a tarot reading if they let things go. So they'll talk about and they'll say things that in a normal conversation, sometimes even with a friend or even with an intimate partner, they might be nervous about or they might avoid talking about, right? But with a counselor and or a tarot reader and or a therapist and all that sort of stuff, they open up much more. So their sense of personal boundaries becomes soft. This is a good thing. It allows you to take things in, listen, reflect back to them what you've heard to make sure that you've got it correct, and then really give them specific help. So I like to start my readings with very little information. I've said this many times, but also I offer, once we get going, if you want to share anything with me, you certainly can. I don't talk about the content of the readings or even the fact that I've done a reading for someone without explicit permission from that client. Just doesn't come up. I just don't talk about it. There are times in my life where this has been frustrating, where it's like, oh my gosh, the stuff that we talked about or that came up in that particular reading this morning would be really useful for this friend of mine to hear, but I have to say that in a way that doesn't indicate that I've done a reading for anyone or that it even came up, right? But so I take pains to do that. There are no circumstances where I would bring that detail up without letting a client know. So for example, if a client confessed to me that they'd commit some sort of a crime or did some sort of an injury to someone, I would stop the reading immediately. And I would say, I'm glad that you just revealed that to me, but I have to tell you right now that I have to stop the reading because we've crossed a border where you're asking me to hold something that has a legal complication for me and probably a legal implication from me. So we'll stop the reading now. That doesn't necessarily mean we can't do a reading in the future. I've never been in this position. It's never happened. But I can't imagine that I would continue to read to someone that just did that for me. And then, depending on whether or not I felt safe, I may even have to let them know that I'm going to need to notify the authorities of this information. If I didn't feel safe about it, I think I would have to just let them step up and leave, and then I would still notify the authorities. That's too much to ask for, a counselor of any kind, that you let them in on that. And I'm not, as a tarot reader, we're not legally protected in the same way that a lawyer would be or that a clergy person would be, right? So keep that kind of stuff in mind and be able and ready to respond to that within a way that works within your own moral framework and your own framework of safety. Important. These are important things. Like I said, again, that's never happened to me. Nobody's ever even come close to approaching that. And I hope I hope it doesn't, right? So I've been protected in that way, I guess. And you know what? As I think of it, I've never even talked to another reader that's felt that they needed to do that. And I've had lots of conversations with hundreds of tarot readers. So it's at best super rare. I can't say it never happens, but yeah, it's a lottery odds moment for that kind of a thing. Okay, so I've already talked about the fact that our clients can gain fuzzy boundaries, and as long as we are trustworthy and ethical, that's a good thing. I think it can help them get better information and better advice. However, I strongly suggest that we do not reciprocate in the fuzzy boundaries to the degree that a client might feel free to do so. I know conversationally for many of us, many Americans in particular, and Canadians too, we want to reciprocate in that because that's a way to sort of let someone else feel comfortable. They share something with us and we share something with them. But I actually, while I do share personal stories and tidbits here and there, I do keep pretty strong boundaries for myself. As an emotional intuitive, I also discover that I need to have a little bit of armor on, because if I'm working with someone that's experiencing trauma, some sort of a pain response, if I'm not a little armored up with a little bit of blocking going on, I wind up feeling their pain, and boy, can that affect my ability to respond to the cards in a real and natural way that's helpful to them. So I've got clients occasionally that will need to actually cry for a little bit, right? And in that case, I'll take a step back. I'll give them the space that they need to do that, but I will maintain a radiant light within the center of my chest as an image, sending it to them that there is still joy and kindness and compassion in the world, but I'm not one of those that comes down to their emotional level and continues a reading on that level. There are people that actually use that as a technique, right? So they'll greet somebody with a similar body language and a similar emotional level. I find for me that doesn't work. If that works for you or for another reader, great. And especially if you're practiced at it, right? So there are ways to actually do that. Not my path. Okay, so we talked about how to end a reading as well, or I promised that I would talk about how to end a reading. I have a closing spiel. I also have an opening spiel, but I recommend that all counselors of all kinds, metaphysical, whatever, but tarot readers in particular, work on a little ritual that they go through at the end of every reading. Here's mine. Let's see, as well as I can talk of it off the cuff. First thing I want to do is I reiterate all of the advices that we came down to. I give mnemonics and little pieces of how to respond to that, or how a better response might be this way than the one that you would habitually go towards. That sort of stuff happens. I try to do this in threes when I can. I just find that threes has a good rhythm, and maybe, never researched this, but maybe it might be, my intuition tells me it's easier for people to remember things in groups of three. So I'm just going to imagine a circumstance. I'll say, number one, in the next couple of days, you need to write down the points that you want this other person in your life to understand. Keep it short, keep it simple. Number two, you're going to practice saying out loud those points in a few different ways with different words and maybe even different emotional qualities, so that they might be able to hear that, right? So try things out before you have the conversation. 1, 2, and then the third one is you're going to actually schedule the conversation sometime in the next week. You're going to talk to them and say, there's a thing I want to talk to you about. It has to do with this. To give them as much information as they might need so that they're not freaking out. When would be a good time for us to take an hour or 2 hours to sit down and talk, right? So there you go. Boom, boom, boom. I'll always recap that way on action items, not just advice. Action items is a good point, right? Okay, so that's one piece of it. Now, while I'm doing that, I am picking up and putting away all of the cards that we had on the table, and I'm giving a couple of overhand shuffles, maybe even a riffle, depends on where we are and if that makes sense to make the noise of a riffle shuffle, so that once those cards come off the table and go back into the deck, they see. That's a clear signal. Reading is over, right? I've already asked before I've gone through the little boom, boom, boom of the reiteration of the action items, do you have any questions? Like I've done that and all of those sorts of things. So it's sort of like, those moments when you're ending a phone call and we go through a little conversational ritual, like, oh, okay. When somebody does a little thing with an extended syllable on it, that lets the other person know, if they're linguistically astute, that that other person is done talking. They've had enough conversation, right? So questions. Do you have any questions? I'll respond to the questions if and when I can. Usually I can, usually by looking at the cards. Then action items, boom, 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 as I'm shuffling the deck. That's usually enough for people to realize that the reading is over. Once I start to put the cards away, if I remember that they haven't had the chance to take a picture of it, because most people have a camera in their phone, I'll remind them of that too. I'm sort of sliding ritual items in there. And then most people get it, stand up and get their things together and start heading away. Usually I'll walk them to the door so that I can open the door wherever we happen to be, and they can step out and I stay in, even if I'm going to leave almost right away anyway. There's a nice little barrier separation for them that puts them out into a free space that's now theirs. I'm no longer the leader, right? I'm no longer the wise counselor or whatever. That whatever archetype they've put onto me, that door closes and that actually cuts itself, and there they are out in the outside world, in the sun or whatever, heading in their own direction. And if they haven't gotten the signal by me putting all the cards away and they're still wanting to talk and whatnot, I'll stand up, and sometimes I'll even gather my coat or whatever. Like I'll give the literal signals that I am stepping out of the building now. Although I always change it whenever I can. When we get to that door, I let them go, close the door behind them, and then they get a good 5 or 10 minutes of whatever they need to do before I actually step out and away. Okay, now I'm trying to remember what was the little third thing that I had tacked on. There was the ritual about ending the reading, and then, how to end the reading in a way that allows them to grow. I teach this one in a workshop, so you're getting a part of a workshop right now. At some point in the next year or so, I'm going to see if I've got a stable cast of my tarot readers in the stable that are interested in doing longer workshops. One person talking for half an hour to an hour, right? Okay, so this little part is, it's twofold. The first piece is the boom, boom, boom. I've already told you about that. Here are your action items that sets them in place. It's the last substantial content they've heard from me. The rest of it is mostly social or me giving a business card. I say, oh, here's my contact information. If you find anybody that's having trouble making a decision or that would be interested in the reading, feel free to hand them all of my information that's on this card. There you go. So there's that piece. But as I then head back to my table, I often read in places that aren't mine, like a big empty lobby of an art gallery is one of my favorite places to go. Specific art gallery, or there's a lovely gazebo that's near me that's out in a park that's often has no one in it and no one around. I like reading there too. So I'll meet somebody in a safe space that way. So I've discovered that I don't like bringing people into my living space. In particular, lots of people that are interested in tarot readings are women, and coming into a white male's home alone with him is intimidating, right? So I don't ask that. I stay public. But if you've got a setup that works for you, that's in a private office or in your dwelling space, that's okay. Like I'm not gonna say that's a bad thing to do. I just know that because of who I am and the archetype that I represent, public spaces do much better for me and for my clients. However, as they are walking away, I am cleaning up or putting my things together or thinking about them. I actually go over in my mind, what were the action steps? What were the things we talked about? And I sort of go backwards through the reading. Action steps, discussing the cards. What cards really stood out in the reading? What was their question or situation? What was their demeanor? What was my first impression upon seeing them come in? And then all the way back to their, was there anything specific that I noted that was notable to me of their initial ask, whether it came through an email or a phone message or whatever. all the way backwards through that I go, for two reasons. One, I firmly believe that the etheric and astral connections we formed in our conversations, they are still active and being untied, right? Physical connection was done with the closing of the door. Boom. 10 of Swords, cut, right? So then the next one is me thinking my way back through, and that's the astral, that's the swords, or sorry, that's the etheric, that's the sword. So I go backwards through that. And then when I go back to their initial ask, mentally, I sever the tie. So I give them their own mind space back to them so that they can continue thinking about it. And then the last thing I do very consciously is I wish them well. Most of the time, I do it right in that particular moment, and that severs the heart connection, right? So it gives them back their own heart space. Now they are an independent, volitional being making their own choices in their own life, in their own way, hopefully using the things that they learned and that we talked about. But even if not, they're an independent being. Boundary, right? So I've cleared the fuzzy boundary. And sometimes I'll hold on to that for just a little bit and send them an email in a day or two to say, I so enjoyed sitting down and having the reading with you. If you made a recording and you'd like to listen to it, I generally recommend that people wait a week or so. Hope all is well. Hope you're getting some light back in, or some specific comment that will remind them about the topic we talked about in the reading we did. So there are those three things: boundaries, how to cleanly end a reading for your own sake, and then how to end the reading in a way that encourages not just their growth, but there's one little aspect. This is the last thing I'll leave you with is that helps me fix the reading in my memory, because I have the experience fairly frequently that someone comes back to me for a reading 5 years later, right? Sometimes even more. And we sit down and I see their face, I hear their voice, I get their name, and then I'm more often than not at this point, I'm able to say, oh, okay, the last time you were here, we were talking about a work decision. And if I recall, we came down to this idea that you were at a place where you needed to have more creative control over the work that you were doing. This is not related to any actual reading, just talking off the top of my head, right? But you needed more creative control than you were getting in your current job. And we talked about a couple of ways to either find the creative control in your current employment, or some ways that you could look for a new employment that would give you that, right? And usually they go, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I remembered that kind of detail. I don't go deeper than that, but I like to reiterate it. And so far, I've never been wrong. I imagine there could be a moment where I go through that sort of review. In anthroposophy, this is called a rukshao, when you go backwards through something to sort of re-cement it in your being that way. I love that act. Without the rukshao, I don't have that kind of recall. But when I get to do it, I do. And it makes people feel really seen when I see them again. I actually remember, I might not remember their name, but I did remember our conversation. Okay, my name is Kevin Quigley. Thanks for sticking with me at Tarot Off the Cuff. We'll have got new videos coming, and we've got some new faces coming into the picture as well. Thank you so much. Hi, thanks for watching. This is Kevin Quigley with Tarot Off the Cuff. If you can take a second, click the subscribe button down below. That'll let you know when a new video is posted and you might want to jump over and watch it. If you hit the thumbs up for the videos that you really like, that will help spread the word, so new people will find Tarot Off the Cuff in their feed, and that helps the channel grow. That would be great. And if you got a question or a comment, positive or negative, whether you agree or disagree, or if you want to add information or your own take on a particular card or a particular topic, put a comment down below. We would love to hear from you. Thanks so much.